In the year 1099, the Crusader army butchered nearly 3,000 Muslims in a single day, marking the beginning of a centuries-long campaign of violence, bloodshed, and terror that would come to define the Crusades. This brutal and devastating period in human history was sparked by Pope Urban II's call to arms in 1095, as he urged Christians to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule, unleashing a tsunami of fanaticism and bloodlust that would engulf the entire region. The Crusades were a complex and multifaceted series of conflicts, driven by a toxic mix of religious zealotry, economic greed, and territorial ambition, which would ultimately leave deep scars on the collective psyche of humanity. As the Crusader armies marched towards Jerusalem, they left a trail of destruction and carnage in their wake, slaughtering entire towns and villages, and perpetrating atrocities that would be remembered for centuries to come. The Crusaders saw themselves as the guardians of Christendom, but in reality, they were little more than marauding bands of thugs and mercenaries, driven by a desire for plunder, power, and prestige. The infamous siege of Anshin 1097–98 was a stark illustration of the Crusaders' brutality, as they massacred thousands of Muslim civilians, and then proceeded to eat the flesh of the dead and dying, in a twisted and depraved display of barbarism. The Crusades were also marked by the rise of fanatical and militant Christian orders, such as the Templars and the Hospitallers, who saw themselves as the shock troops of Christendom, and were willing to do whatever it took to achieve their twisted goals. These orders were responsible for some of the most heinous atrocities committed during the Crusades, including the massacre of thousands of Muslim and Jewish civilians in the city of Jerusalem, and the brutal suppression of heretical Christian sects. The Crusaders' fanatical devotion to their cause was matched only by their utter disregard for human life, as they slaughtered, tortured, and enslaved countless innocents, in the name of their twisted and bloodthirsty God. The impact of the Crusades was felt far beyond the battlefields of the Middle East, as the conflicts had a profound and lasting impact on the social, cultural, and economic fabric of Europe. The Crusades helped to fuel the rise of anti-Semitism, as Jews were blamed for the crucifixion of Christ, and were subsequently subjected to pogroms, massacres, and expulsions. The Crusades also helped to accelerate the decline of the Byzantine Empire, as the Crusaders' relentless attacks on Constantinople weakened the empire's defenses, and paved the way for the eventual Ottoman conquest. The Crusades even had a profound impact on the development of Western civilization, as the conflicts helped to fuel the growth of nationalism, militarism, and xenophobia, which would come to define the course of modern history. One of the most disturbing and enduring legacies of the Crusades is the persistence of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry, which continues to plague Western societies to this day. The Crusades helped to create a toxic and pernicious narrative of Muslim inferiority, which has been used to justify centuries of colonialism, imperialism, and cultural genocide. This narrative has been perpetuated by politicians, pundits, and propagandists, who have sought to demonize and dehumanize Muslims, and to justify the most egregious forms of violence and discrimination against them. The consequences of this narrative have been devastating, as Muslims have been subjected to forced conversions, massacres, and expulsions, and have been denied their basic human rights and dignity. As we reflect on the dark and troubled history of the Crusades, it is clear that the ghosts of this brutal and devastating period continue to haunt us to this day. The Crusades serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of fanaticism, nationalism, and xenophobia, and of the devastating consequences of unchecked militarism and aggression. The Crusades also serve as a powerful warning about the dangers of toxic ideologies and pernicious narratives, which can be used to justify the most heinous atrocities and human rights abuses. As we move forward in an increasingly complex and interconnected world, it is more important than ever that we confront the dark truths of our collective past, and that we work to build a more just, equitable, and compassionate future for all humanity. The echoes of the Crusades can still be heard in the modern world, as extremist groups and ideologies continue to perpetuate the same toxic and pernicious narratives that fueled the original conflicts. The rise of white nationalism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism are all stark reminders that the demons of the Crusades are still very much alive, and that the struggle for human rights, dignity, and justice is far from over. As we navigate the treacherous landscape of modern geopolitics, it is more important than ever that we remember the lessons of the Crusades, and that we work to build a world that is more just, more equitable, and more compassionate for all people. The darkness of the Crusades will always be a part of our collective history, a haunting reminder of the atrocities that humanity is capable of inflicting upon itself, and a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked power, fanaticism, and hatred.